Okay, fight fans, this is what you've been waiting for. It's now later in the day on Tuesday, April 19th, 2016, and you know who that guy is sharing the screen with me. I'm sure he's been on the phones all day long. That, of course, is Ariel Helwani. Ariel, all right, man, let's just get right to it. Let's not waste any time. And for folks who may not know, and of course you don't, I haven't talked to you about this at all. I don't know what you're about to say, so I'll just ask what I think most people are wondering. What the hell is going on?
Wow, what a stunning day, right? I mean, we talk often about how this is one of the more interesting beats, at least in sports. This day in a nutshell would certainly back that up. So it all starts at around, I think, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Conor McGregor sends out a tweet implying that he has suddenly retired from mixed martial arts. Now, I waited to address this tweet, retweet this tweet. I didn't know what was going on. Sometimes, as you know, fighters like to play pranks and make jokes, and I just didn't know what the heck was going on. Of course, we know that he was supposed to fight at UFC 200 against Nate Diaz, so what the heck is this? And also, I knew that there was a whole big media day planned for Friday in Las Vegas. Him and Nate Diaz were supposed to be in Las Vegas. They were going to do a big photo shoot. There was a lot going into this particular week, and also tickets were on sale next week for UFC 200. So the timing was definitely very strange. And after talking to several people, they told me quite adamantly that this was not a prank. This was not a hoax. This was not a troll job, that he was being serious by tweeting this, which was even more puzzling. But, I was happy. Okay, at least, he's not playing any games here. And then, talking to people and trying to figure out what the heck is going on, where is this coming from? There really weren't any answers given up. But the one thing that kept coming up, and I thought of this as well as the day was moving on, like, where could this be coming from? Of course, there had been rumors and, sort of discussion. People had been, even I spoke to Conor about this not that long ago, about a potential rift between the UFC and Conor McGregor. But let's not forget, they gave him what he wanted in the Nate Diaz rematch. So that to me suggested that things were going pretty well between the two sides. But let's not forget what happened a little over a week ago in Ireland. Conor McGregor was sitting cage side when a teammate of his named Charlie Ward at SBG Ireland fought a Portuguese fighter, Joao Carvalho, and beat him. And a few days later, tragically, news came out that Carvalho passed away as a result of the injuries that he sustained in that fight. And Conor McGregor went to Facebook afterwards and talked about how devastating this was, and really put out a heartfelt statement about the young fighter's passing. And I don't think that we can just brush that aside. I think that based off of the discussions that I've had and knowing Conor like I do, the idea of going to Las Vegas and promoting a fight and just pretending like all is well in the fight game after witnessing something like that firsthand is a tough thing for a young man to swallow, at least one in his shoes. And I believe that's perhaps one of the reasons why he wasn't willing to go to Las Vegas to promote this event. Now, Dana White went on SportsCenter and announced that they had pulled him from the card because he didn't want to promote, which is accurate. There were issues in terms of getting him to Las Vegas from Iceland, which is where he is with his team. But the entire picture wasn't told, and I think that's part of the picture from Conor's end. Unfortunately, he's not talking here, and he's not getting ahead of this story. He did initially, but now it's the UFC side that is out, and he's kind of being seen as this rebel. But he's typically been a team player when it comes to stepping up. We know that, taking fights on short notice and things of that nature, and he likes money. There's a lot going on in this young man's life, and I don't think that we should brush aside what happened a little over a week ago in that fight in Ireland.
Okay, so let me see if I can wrap my head around this, because everything you're saying makes sense, and of course I believe you. So I'm trying to put it all together. So we have on the one hand this tragic incident in Dublin where João Carvalho died, and of course, again, as you noted, that Facebook message that McGregor put out, he seemed quite shaken by the experience, understandably so. But then we have what Dana White is saying, which is well, he doesn't want to promote, but if he's in Iceland, he's still training, so he would still, if the UFC wasn't making him fly to the US for this, he would still fight at UFC 200, right?
Yeah, one thing that was brought up in talking to people was, well, why can't they just delay this, like just give the guy some space. It's mid-April. The fight is July 9th. Now, that could be all well and good from their perspective, but you also have to think of it from the UFC's perspective. From what I understand, a lot of the fighters who will be competing at UFC 200 are scheduled to be in Las Vegas for this big, kickoff press conference. Like I said, tickets are going on sale. They were planning a lot of media. They were going to do a very elaborate photo shoot that I'm told, was going to cost them well over seven figures. So there was a lot at stake here for the UFC. It wasn't just, hey, we need you to sit for 30 minutes in front of the media and answer some questions. Now that's their perspective. On the flip side, and to be honest, I have a hard time not sympathizing with Conor McGregor in this case. Look, he had just, if this is what is going through his mind, he had just experienced a very traumatic event directly related to the sport in which he competes, which he is the face of in his country. And also, we're not in Ireland. Go look at the national papers in Ireland. Go look at the national radio broadcasters in Ireland, the national TV broadcasters in Ireland. They were all talking about this tragic death. This was a very, very big deal and is still a big deal in Ireland, as it would be a big deal here in the United States, especially because it is directly linked to Conor McGregor and his famous team, SBG Ireland. Even his coach, John Kavanagh, spoke about this, and they're trying to fix the situation there, more regulation, et cetera, et cetera. So this hit them very hard. For us, it was a news story, and we covered it, and then just the nature of the beast, you kind of move on to the next thing. That's sad, and that's sort of a product of the times, but that's just the way news works. For them, they were dealing with this directly. They were sitting there cage side watching this happen, and then the young man passes away. So for them to then go, they're cool, they're training, they're getting ready for battle, all that stuff, but to go and the glitz and glamour and to fly from Iceland to Las Vegas and just be a promoter and to play the game, perhaps at this time wasn't the most appealing thing.
I see. So he didn't want to get in Nate Diaz's face and do all the cholo from the hood and all that, the antics and the anger and the swearing and everything else. I guess he didn't want to be a part of that show. Okay, I see that perspective. So let's analyze this just a little bit here with just for a couple of minutes if we can. How reminiscent in your mind is this from 2008? I tweeted about this, when Fitch didn't want to sign over his likeness rights for the THQ video game in perpetuity. Dana White was like, Fitch is gone. There was another, I think Christian Wellish was gone. And they were threatening to yank Cain Velasquez, so he sort of relented. Like, do you find this to be a promotional squabble, like promoter versus fighter, or is this some sort of like temporary misunderstanding? In other words, we've heard so much about there's a rift brewing between McGregor and the UFC. Is this a manifestation of that, or was that all not really true and this sort of came out of nowhere just because of the more present circumstances that we've alluded to?
I feel like it's closer related to it's more like the UFC 137 incident with Nick Diaz and GSP, which, oh, by the way, in some ways almost made Nick Diaz into a more popular figure, this sort of anti-establishment counterculture figure, and I think over time people are going to side with Conor as they usually do. I mean, his fans, as you have noted, are a very passionate and loyal bunch. And it's interesting the way that this is being phrased by the UFC on their Twitter account and on ESPN and whatnot. The UFC is pulling him from the card. He is not withdrawing from the card. And I think it's pretty clear what happened here. There was a squabble. They wanted him to get to Vegas. He wasn't interested in getting to Vegas. He said peace, put it out on Twitter, and they said, all right, well, it's not going to go down quite like that, and we're going to tell our side of the story here. And now it's almost up to him to really explain, well, why didn't you go to Vegas? It's this back and forth. So I feel like look, there have been issues with fighter and promoter since the beginning of time, the beginning of combat sports. But if I'm going to compare it to a specific story in MMA, I feel like it's more like that Diaz GSP story. If people don't know, there was a press conference in Las Vegas for this big fight that we had been waiting for so long. Diaz was the Strikeforce champion, GSP the UFC champion. GSP shows up to the press conference. Diaz is nowhere to be found. Dana White is answering phone calls from Cesar Gracie in the middle of the press conference. It was a surreal scene. And then a video emerges of Diaz talking about not showing up to their beauty pageant and all that. In the end, it worked out. They ended up meeting a couple of years later. But isn't it somewhat surreal that this is a Diaz story, but it's another guy, not the Diaz brother, who's missing out on the media stuff? And Nate Diaz is, as of last discussions, supposed to be in Vegas as of today. Like, he's playing it by the book. He's doing everything that's asked of him to show up and do all the media stuff. How crazy is that? I mean, who would have predicted this? The whole thing is very, very unique.
Yeah, to be on the outside of a Diaz brothers' professionalism is quite outside. I suspect most fans are going to look at this and say, you could have had, just by having Conor McGregor on the bill, you're going to sell more than without him, even with all this promotional material. I think a lot of fans are probably going to say that. I think a lot of them are also going to say, this guy bailed you out not a number of times, and then when he wanted to go back home, did the Ultimate Fighter. Now, of course, he was paid to do those things. They weren't charity, but nevertheless, to your point, Conor McGregor galvanizes a pretty fervent and loyal fan base. I expect a lot of that. So let's just end on this. Still a fluid situation. By the time we put this out, who knows what's going to happen. But my guess is he's not retired. I just don't buy it. I think they'll work out a deal. What is your hunch about this whole thing ultimately when it all plays out?
Wow, I hate to hypothesize. And by the way, I do feel the need to reiterate that a lot of the people close to him and close to this situation from all angles are really keeping their cards close to their vest on this one. But the death and the traumatic event and being a part of that does seem to be a reoccurring topic. So until he comes out and really speaks about it, who knows what else is on his mind, what else is bothering him. Even Gunnar Nelson's father, Holly Nelson, who coincidentally was his very first manager, tweeted out a picture of him and Conor this evening. He put it out on Facebook saying, I'm here with a newly retired fighter and a future UFC fighter. He's, Conor seems to be in good spirits, and he's there in Iceland. Patty Houlihan is there as well. John Kavanaugh's there. They're all, they're training and doing their thing with Gunnar Nelson, who's fighting in a few weeks' time. But until we hear from him, I really want to know where he's at. He says that he's retired. We know how this goes in the fight game. He's just 27 years old. He loves money. He is a uber star. I mean, I don't know about you, but radio shows and TV shows that I have been a fan of for years have contacted me tonight to ask to come on to speak about this whole situation, and I've turned them all down just because I don't feel 100% comfortable, hypothesizing and throwing out theories and things like that. But it's amazing the interest that this story has generated. I mean, honestly, before today, I didn't quite realize. I knew Conor was a megastar, a worldwide superstar. I didn't realize it was at this point. I think Darren Rovell tweeted out that, this is as of like 3 hours ago, that he had like something like 60,000 or so retweets, and only 5 athletes or 8 athletes in 2015 had that many retweets on a singular tweet last year. I mean, just unbelievable numbers if you look at that one tweet, the reach and the interest and the amount of people talking about this. So it's really all mind-blowing. I really don't know what to expect. I mean, who would have thought 8 hours ago we'd be talking about Conor McGregor retiring and off UFC 200? It's absolutely shocking and stunning. So I don't want to hang my hat on anything. Selfishly, I hope they could figure it out. I hope cooler heads prevail. I hope we get to see the fight. I hope we get to be a part of UFC 200. I know that I can say that the UFC is actively looking for a new opponent for Nate Diaz. Whether or not that fight is made, it's tough to get a Diaz brother to agree to especially to a change of plans, especially when he feels like maybe he has been played or wrong. They are looking for a new opponent. They are looking for other opponents as well in other fights. Dana White said on SportsCenter that they're looking for an opponent for Diaz, a new opponent for Diaz, and potentially adding another fight as well. So, hey, look, John Jones talked about wanting to fight at 200. Cormier has alluded to this as well. Could that happen if Jones wins on Saturday? I mean, there's options out there for the UFC. Let's not forget this. But this is unfortunate. This is not a good day for the sport. There's no doubt about that. Arguably the biggest star right now, suddenly retiring. The UFC coming out and saying that they're pulling him. I mean, there's nothing good about what happened today.
Yeah, and I'll just end by saying I was watching some Latin television stations, and they had all the Conor McGregor news as well.
Wow.
It was just shocking to see. You don't really appreciate someone's reach until, I guess, something like this happens. So it's crazy. Okay, so you can get at Ariel, or Ariel, however you want to pronounce it, at Ariel Helwani on Twitter. I'll put a graphic up so everyone can see it. Follow along at MMA Fighting. I'm at SBN Luke Thomas. Like we said, a fluid situation. Ariel, thank you so much for your time, man, and I guess I'll see you in Vegas tomorrow. Yes. I don't know what's about to happen.
Crazy. What a time. Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.